Undertale is an independent role-playing game developed and published by Toby Fox. The game was released on September 15th, 2015 on PC and Mac OS X. In Undertale, the player controls a human who has fallen into and needs to escape from the Underground, an area underneath Earth where monsters were banished after a war with humans. Undertale plays much like a standard menu-based RPG. All the staple RPG elements are here. You have your XP and levels, along with combat, item, and flee menu options. Where Undertale attempts to differentiate itself from these other RPGs is in its non-violent and defense options. Instead of having a magic menu like most of these menu-based RPGs, there's an action menu in which you partake in a non-violent action and eventually spare an opponent. To defend from opponents' attacks, you're thrown into a bullet hell-like minigame where you control the character's soul and dodge incoming attacks. On top of this, Undertale tries to further differentiate itself through its comedic writing, inspired in part by games like Earthbound. All of these factors have led to Undertale being called the greatest PC game of all time, the greatest RPG of all time, and other such grandiose accolades. But how does it actually stand up? Let's find out with The Good. Undertale has a pretty novel save feature. It's not incredibly new or innovative, but Undertale remembers things you did in the game even without saving. For instance, I killed a character and I closed the game. When I retried the fight using passive options, the game remembered and brought up the fact that I'd killed the character. I thought that was pretty neat. Another really high point of Undertale is the music. All of the music is absolutely fantastic. All of the tracks very nicely set the mood for what's going on in the game and are a joy to listen to. Many of the tracks got stuck in my head and I was humming them throughout my day or in the shower or wherever. Another high point of Undertale is the writing. Most of it, at least. There is one character in particular that I have a problem with, but I'll bring that up later in the bad. Most of the comedic writing was actually quite funny. From the bad puns and wordplay to the ridiculous parody events, I found myself giggling while playing the game more often than not. I was actually surprised by this because the beginning of the game was sold to me as a very funny experience, and in the beginning I wasn't initially sucked in by it and I didn't think it was very funny, but as the game progressed, it got funnier and I enjoyed it a lot more towards the end. The story of Undertale, much like the comedic elements, initially didn't sell me, but as it expanded and went on, I found myself really enjoying and being engrossed in the story by the end. I very much enjoyed the two extreme endings, revelations, and lore elements. Overall, the lore and world building of Undertale is another high point. Every area in Undertale is diverse and has some nice world building and lore elements to accompany it. But in the end, they all have the same familiarity and they all feel cohesive. Everything was kept very fresh and very new while keeping a familiarity to it. Playing much into that factor is the bullet hell defense minigame. When you defend against an enemy's attacks, you're sent into a bullet hell, where you have to control your character's soul, as I explained in the intro. Now, the defense minigame changes rules with each major battle. Sometimes you're stuck between three lines you have to navigate, other times you're playing a shoot-'em-up-like little minigame. The diversity in these defense games kept things fresh and entertaining. On top of that, they add to each other. Elements and new rules introduced in earlier battles will show up in later battles. For instance, in a very early major battle, you are introduced to blue attacks. When you encounter a blue attack, it won't hurt you as long as you stay still when hit with it. These blue attacks show up in different ways throughout various battles, but remain the same and have the same rules. Undertale does a great job of keeping these elements fresh, but familiar. No game is perfect, so let's take a look at the bad. To start us off, the one character that I had a real problem with writing-wise was Dr. Alphys. Alphys is a character that is absolutely annoying and frustrating to interact with. The character stutters and makes the text go by slow. On top of that, they interrupt you all the time, and it's all played for laughs, as this is the character's joke and gimmick. But none of it is funny or entertaining in any way, and frankly, just slows down the game and makes it absolutely frustrating to play. Now, these next two complaints are my main major complaints with Undertale, and it has to do with the combat systems. So first off, for the violent combat, it's menu-based combat, and it's incredibly boring. It lacks any thinking or strategy. On top of that, it lacks any need for some physical skill. So you just hit Z and you wait for the much more engaging defense minigame. Usually in these menu-based combat RPGs, you at least have cool animations to watch when you pull off a strong attack. You get no such animations at all in Undertale. Only your enemies have animations, you have none, everything's seen from a first-person perspective, much like Earthbound. Now, this wouldn't be as much as a problem if the game actually had some challenge to it, but both non-violent and violent systems are so brain-dead and simple in this game, you're just mashing Z, waiting for the cool, much more engaging bullet hell minigame. The non-violent systems in Undertale are awful too. Undertale tries to pass it off as like making some type of grand moral statement that violence is bad, and since this is a video game, non-violence is new and unique because video games are all violence. But it isn't, especially in a genre like RPGs. Even more egregious than its presentation of its non-violent systems is how the system actually works. It's menu-based and nearly identical to the combat. When there's non-violent solutions to problems in other games, it requires a completely different playstyle from the player. Take for instance Fallout New Vegas, where you can talk your way through problems as opposed to shooting your way through the problems. In Undertale, to attack, select combat and then attack. To use non-violent actions, select the action, and then press Z. It's the same exact thing and requires no thinking from the player. And you're thrust into the same defense minigame regardless of the option, so the only difference in gameplay is whether you select combat or action. And my final complaint about Undertale is much more minor. The art is fairly inconsistent in style, but that's about it. Overall, Undertale is a good game, but it's very far from the best anything ever. First hour of Undertale is pretty indicative of the rest of the game, so if you're interested in it, I would recommend purchasing Undertale on Steam, playing it for an hour or so, and if you don't like it, refund it. But now it's time for my rating. The hell, IGN, I mean, Undertale's a good game, but a 10 out of 10? Jesus Christ, game theory.
Let alone better than
Undertale.
Why did Earthbound get a 9 out of 10?
All these other
great
games
are the best
you have
game
Ness
ever on Game
as Sans from Undertale.
They're not even
Melee.
On top of that, it's not even
You're
close
just
to
saying
Smash
postures
better
better
than
than
Earthbound.
They're not even related
What's with all
in
these
any
people
way
saying
besides
Undertale's better than Earthbound?
RPGs.